Welcome to today's Miller Mindset, brought to you by BitLyft. This is where we discuss all things cybersecurity by cutting through the noise, sharing brutal truths, and leaving you with strategies to keep what you've built safe and strong. Today, I've got an amazing individual joining me on Miller Mindset. His name is Joe Sheridan, and I'd like to introduce him and let him explain a few things about himself and his past. Joe, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Jason. My name is Joe Sheridan. I'm Director of IT for Elmet Technologies. Been there for about a year and a half, but been in IT for almost 40 years now, across many industries: banking, metal manufacturing in biochemical technologies, insurance industry, and now I'm in the refractory metals industry working for Elmet. Elmet Technologies is a manufacturer of high purity molybdenum and tungsten. We're really the only integrated manufacturer in the U.S. after an acquisition in 2023 between H.C. Stark and Elmet Technologies. So as a result of the acquisition, they brought me on board, and we've been making many changes after this acquisition. One of our main industries is aerospace and defense. And so CMMC is right in our wheelhouse. I have, as you know, a lot of experience with CMMC from my last company. And so doing it all again, keep learning more every day.
I considered you an expert before, but, multiple companies with DoD, CMMC background. I mean, yeah, learning every day. I don't think that is... it's an understatement sometimes, right?
I would never call myself an expert. I don't think there's any expert out there because it changes so much. You can never know everything that's going on.
Yeah, the moment you do feel like you know it, it changes, right?
And you usually don't find out from the DoD. You find out from somebody else, like one of these podcasts or an article.
You sort of touched on this a little bit, but I wouldn't mind you kind of double clicking or drilling down into this. What Elmet maybe builds a little bit. You talk about a little bit about like what you can share about what they build. And then, maybe, why cybersecurity is so important, around what they're building.
We manufacture, refractory metals, molybdenum, and tungsten mainly, but with many other products as well. We serve the healthcare industry, actually building a lot of product for MRI machines. We do a lot with electrical, as far as electric grids and metals that are needed for those. Actually, our companies have been around for well over 100 years. They were making tungsten filaments for light bulbs. That's when the business started. But we've expanded into many other things. In the defense space, we provide a lot of different products there. Aerospace, we are involved with a lot of the prime, manufacturers in that space. Mm-hmm. And we're continuing to expand into other areas as well, so I think the company's in a really high growth mode. Great company to work for, very, very intelligent, core group of people that work there, very, very experienced in what they do. So, a lot of opportunities for growing. If you're following us on our website, you're seeing how we are expanding. We're involved with a lot of different products. And we're really expanding at a fast pace. Cybersecurity, as you can imagine, in the defense space, it's really one size fits all. The NIST 171 rules, 110 controls, pass fail. So I came on board.
Oh, wait a minute. You said pass fail. Yeah, there's no grace, no room for margin in there. It's either yes or no. Black or white?
It is a pass fail, but you do have a remediation period where if you do fail, you'll be able to, redeem yourself. And
what is that remediation period?
From what we're seeing, so as you probably know, CMMC came out in 2019. DFAR 7012 came out on all contracts in 2016, requiring all defense contractors to meet the 110 controls as part of their contracts. There wasn't really any enforcement. It was the honor system, but over time it was clear that it was needed to have some kind of a certification process.
The honor system wasn't working.
I guess you could say that. So in 2019, they announced that they're going to start doing certification to make sure that you are meeting all 110 controls. Everybody kind of scrambled. There was a whole review process, 300,000 suppliers and who's going to do these assessments. So the C3PIOs kind of came out of that new mandate. And over the last number of years since 2019, there's been changes to the CMMC rule. As of fall of last year, the CFR 32 rule was announced, which codified this. That basically said, all right, it's time to get ready. You need to be ready to receive your certification. We're now waiting on the CFR 48 rule to come out, which basically is the starting gun when we really need to start getting ready and planning for these assessments. And so they came out, they're going to come out with a 4-phased approach over the next number of years to completely roll this out. And then all contracts will require having your certification in place. So as a group at Elmet, we've been evaluating, as you can imagine, merging of 3 different companies into one. We've been going through a lot of change, re-architecture, but we are well on our way to preparing for our certification next year, making a lot of changes. One of them working with BitLyft to be our new SIM provider. We've decided to move away from our last provider and using BitLyft. So there's a lot of work to be done there. I think anybody that's in this space and has to do this work, it's daunting. It's a lot of work. You can expect to spend at least a year and a half minimum working on meeting those compliance standards, and getting ready is a challenge in itself, providing all that evidence, gathering all the evidence and being ready for that assessment.
Yeah, it sounds like you're navigating, the NIST 800-171 controls really well right now, right? I mean, this is what we would consider high stakes manufacturing, environment. But anybody who is manufacturing something for the Department of Defense or the primes needs to be following NIST 800-171 and needs to be getting ready for this, correct?
Well, they needed to be following this in 2016.
Yes.
I don't think everybody took it serious. If you listen to either Katie Arrington or Stacy Bosgenik, who are part of this, DOD and the CMMC program, they'll tell you that you should have already been following this. We're just making sure by requiring the certification. You'll probably find by scouring the internet that the DOD is getting very serious. They're now fining companies that are not reporting properly. If you say you're 110, but you're 20, if that's ever found out, there's usually a fine involved with that. They're using the False Claims Act against a lot of different companies. I've been reading on several occasions, $20 million fines, $8 million fines. It's a serious thing. So if you've attended any webinars or conferences with any of the primes and the DOD, any of the DOD branches, of military, they're very clear that all this is meant to protect our warfighters. Any information that's spilled out and found out and that is used against us, it puts our warfighters at jeopardy. And so, it's really meant to protect our country. I think a lot of people are looking at it, well, it's too expensive for me, and why do we have to spend all this money? It's the same with any retail company. Damage from these attacks, really cause a lot of problems. I've myself, I'm sure you've heard of many companies that have gone through ransomware attacks where people have lost their jobs. There's lost revenue. It's very expensive for anybody to have to go through this. On the DoD side, any compromised information can be used against us. So we really need to protect our information that's given to us from the DoD, and that's the purpose of all these rules and controls.
100%. I love what you said there around, this has been in place since 2016. So we're here in June of 2025 talking about this today. This isn't anything new. This has been in place for the last 9 years. It's now that there's teeth in it. There is repercussions and there's penalties. And you're right. I've read about 2 or 3 of the penalties. And like you said, the 8 million and the 20 million as far as a penalty in the False Claims Act. I mean, well, I would say you probably could have spent a lot less than 8 million or 20 million and done cybersecurity correctly and put these 110 controls in place, followed NIST 800-171, and you wouldn't be paying a penalty.
Well, and it's really going to mean a lot to have that all in place anyway. There's opportunities for companies to expand their business in the defense space. It's going to be a requirement, and any new business that's out there, having that certification just opens doors for you. It not only protects you and your business and from attacks and protects our country, but it's really going to open up some new opportunities. I think as the years go by, we're going to see newer technologies that are come out, AI, quantum computing. All this stuff is going to open up new doors for attackers. It's already out there. And so we need to be on top of what's required now, because what's coming is going to be even more, the standard is going to be much higher in protecting this information.
And you mentioned AI. We've already started seeing AI help with automated attacks. We've seen it be extremely successful at attacks already. And again, we're here in June of 2025. Where AI is really in the beginning stages, if you ask a lot of professionals. So one thing that I wanted to bring up, and for the audience and listeners maybe, is you and I have used this term before called CMMC equivalent. And I wanted to bring this up and sort of give definition and context to people that may be using the terminology CMMC equivalent in this time period. Can you expound on that?
In my approach to CMMC, we've been looking at CMMC moderate tool sets that work for us. CMMC equivalent is really, we look at it on a case-by-case basis. Is it going to meet the requirement in the end? And when you look at what you're using as far as cloud solutions, if CUI is in any way involved with your cloud platforms, you really should be looking at the FedRAMP moderate platforms to use. So FedRAMP equivalent is usually aligned with companies that are in the process maybe of getting to FedRAMP moderate. If you're level 2 like we are, that's really what the focus is you really look at moderate platforms that are already certified and have gone through that process. Equivalent will in some cases meet the requirement. In our case, we have a partner a CMMC partner consultant that we rely on for any questions in that space. Do we need to go with moderate? Do we need to go with equivalent? Because as you know, with CMMC 2.0 that came out last year or a couple years ago, actually with the 32 rule when it came out, there were some changes to that. How they even look at MSPs. Well, that may not even be required to have that MSP on a FedRAMP platform. So really need to look at the situation. If I'll give you a great example. If you're using a tool from your MSP and they have an RMM tool, if that RMM tool is going to access maybe devices that have CUI on it, well, then maybe you should be on a FedRAMP moderate platform for that solution. So you really have to look at where your data is, where you're storing it, who's accessing it, for whether you want to go with equivalent or a moderate platform. That's at least our approach for that platform.
And I want to highlight something that you said there is that it's hinged on CUI. CUI is what is the deriving factor behind why we should be looking at FedRAMP moderate or something lower or higher, right? As far as controls go, is if there is CUI on that machine and you're going to have software packages that are communicating with that machine and going to the cloud, this is okay. Now we need to have a more in-depth conversation around it, right?
Yeah. So one of the things you should be doing as a supplier in the DIB is look at your CUI boundary, define what is within that boundary. If you have solutions that will never touch a CUI, For example, your payroll systems. Yeah, you don't need to have anything in the FedRAMP platform there. The other thing is where you store your CUI. Do you have control over it? Do you have, strict permissions and who can access that? That's really should be your focus, and that'll help you define what platforms and the cloud that need to meet those requirements.
And, we've sort of talked a little bit about the evolution of compliance expectations in the defense supply chain. You've seen it over the years, right? I mean, we talk about DFARS in 2016. We talk about CMMC in 2019. Is there anything else that you'd kind of like look at and say the evolution of compliance in the defense space has changed over the last several years that has been for the better or for the worse?
Yeah, so ITAR, we'll talk a little bit about ITAR and how that fits in there. At the very beginning, when I got into the defense aerospace arena and the CMMC rule came out, a lot of people were scrambling, because we know we got to protect CUI, but what about ITAR? So ITAR was, well, kind of fits in there, but not really. And then the rule changed and said that CUI is above ITAR. ITAR falls within that boundary, and so that's a whole different security thing to think about. You're talking about foreign nationals and who can access, and you got to have people with green card or be a U.S. citizen, and where do you store that information? And physical access is a little bit different there. So that has kind of evolved. I think with AI, I attended the National Cyber Summit in Huntsville last year, and I've been to those before. And CMMC was all the talk at the previous conferences, and recently it was all AI. Everything's now AI. So we're now shifting. All right, now how does this fit into that? We need to maybe have an AI policy and what we use. We can't really use ChatGPT, and put all this stuff out there because machine learning is going to ingest all that, and anybody's going to be able to find technical details possibly. So, I think that's evolving. Another thing that I think is going to really shake things up is post-quantum computing, encryption. So right now in the CUI space in CMMC, you want to focus on FIPS 140 encryption for what you're using. With post-quantum computing, they're wanting to protect us against quantum computing capabilities of breaking that encryption. So the DoD has been working on a new encryption method. It looks like it's going to be FIPS 160. What is that going to change? Imagine all of your firewalls, anything with encryption, will now have to be upgraded to follow this new encryption method. So I think as these things come out, AI, the threats there, quantum computing, we're going to be changing over the next X number of years. I don't think it's going to slow down. We're going to hear more and more announcements. And keep in mind, CMMC 2.0 got rid of 20 controls that were in CMMC 1.0. They had mentioned that those could come back. So those 20 additional controls are going to add more work. I've also heard at some of the conferences that they are talking about zero trust on everything, and you can implement all these tools and maybe not be fully zero trust. So we need to start thinking about that. There's a lot of changes I think they're going to come down the road here that we're going to be scrambling to keep up with.
The takeaway there is to make sure you keep your eyes and ears on the information that's constantly rolling out, and try and keep to the best of your abilities up to speed, on what's taking place. Because I too agree. The amount of updates that are happening, not only in information and new rules, but you talked about firewalls and just thinking about the encryption level at firewalls. Think about the encryption level at disk. Think about the encryption level at, you fill in the blank. That's going to require, more horsepower and probably newer machines, because encryption takes horsepower. It takes processing power. It takes RAM. It takes machines that can handle that. And that's going to require staying up with the latest hardware, software, systems. I just think about, wow, you might be doing, network updates. You might be updating all of the endpoints and servers just to make sure that you can keep up with encryption. Let's talk a few minutes around strategy in implementing the controls. Now, you yourself, and this is why I say, you're good at this, is that I have seen you work through the strategy, and I have seen you work through implementing controls. But for somebody that's out there that's listening, and they may think, gosh, this is a daunting task. It could be a daunting task, but you've already been through it. So maybe, just talk about some of the strategies and the way that you implemented the controls and walk through this from, A to Z.
Yeah, so if you were to look at all the NIST controls, they break out into different categories. You have the technology side, which is a given, and a lot of people focus on that. Well, I got a firewall and I have endpoint protection, but there's a lot more to it. Your policies, your procedures all have to be fully documented, and you have to provide evidence that you're following those. If you read through all the controls, that's daunting. I like that word daunting because to develop, if you're not a large company, to develop all that, it takes a lot of time. You have the training side. You need to make sure you're training people. You have a security awareness program, and people are being challenged. We use a tool that challenges everybody in our company on phishing attempts, and we're constantly communicating on people where they're failing and how we
So
can.
you say everybody. Are you sending phishing emails and challenging even the CEO and the executives?
Yes. If you think about that, they are more at risk than anybody
Yeah,
because they are a target of most attackers. They hold a lot of information, and they work with a lot of, information that's probably not available to everybody else in the company.
correct.
So, protecting them is a really high priority. And yes, meeting the phishing test, everybody goes through the remedial training if they fail.
Yeah.
But if you do it right and you do it on a regular schedule, I don't think you want to do training once a year. You want to do continuous training. You want to do continuous phishing tests with people on a regular basis. Because think about it, you're hiring new people, and they don't know anything about this. You want to educate them and make sure they're following the rules. And what do you do if they are repeat offenders? That's another thing. So if you have somebody that fails every single time, you probably want to sit down one-on-one and say, you could bring this whole company down. It only takes one person to click on the wrong thing. And, I've been through it. I've been through, at one company, we had 2 ransomware attacks in 1 year. We fortunately had plans in place for ransomware recovery, and we were back up in a couple hours. But it takes a lot of work to get there. You want to have your backups in place. You want to have alerting in place. You want to have the team trained on what they do and how we notify people and respond to those things. So, there's a lot to think about there. And yes, our executives need to be part of it. I know they probably don't want to hear that they need to be part of the training, but they should really be leading by example. Fortunately for me, Elmet has a great leadership team, and we're all working together to make it a safer place to work.
We were just talking to somebody about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and they were the IT person for the company. They were about 110 people in size, and they said that they were absolutely struggling to get the leadership on board with following CMMC. And the leadership was not on board, didn't believe that they really had to do it. And it was a fight and a battle for this person to try and convince leadership to do these things. And I said, well, you should put the information in front of them. They should read it for themselves, because if they don't follow it, then it's essentially fraud.
Yeah. So when I came on board with Elmet, we put together a presentation for leadership to explain, this is what we need to do and why we need to do it. Like I said, I'm fortunate that our leadership team is very supportive of that. I understand it's very expensive. And if you were to talk to the head of the CMMC program at the DoD, they hear this in when they come out with new releases, there's an open response time where people can comment on this. And usually they hear, this is too expensive. Why do we have to do this? It's understandable. It's a lot of money. But not just for the defense industry, for everybody, it's becoming more and more risky to not have tools in place, whether you're in defense or not. In the defense space, it's obviously we need to have that in place. But yeah, I think if you had lay out a good strategy, we started out this part of the conversation talking about strategy. That has to be part of the strategy. Communicate what we need to do. We have done that. We have a roadmap. We've laid out how we've approached that. Technology, putting that all in place, having that all in place, making sure you're testing that platform, pen testing to show where you have gaps. You also need to have those policies in place. Gather your evidence as you're going through the process, because that is a huge part of getting ready for your assessment. You want to provide as much evidence that you are meeting every control, whether it's a policy, it's a configuration. You want to take screenshots and gather all that together and provide that to make it easier for you. The approach from the DoD and DIPCAC is to provide the information, they review it over 5 to 7 weeks, and then they can send up to 5 to 7 assessors out to your plant over a week to evaluate some of the gaps that you might have in that information. Once they remediate, they find out what you have to remediate, they'll provide that list, and you have X number of days to complete that. What does that mean if you don't meet that? We haven't really seen if people are losing contracts or if they're being fined. But, I think we're going to see more and more of that. Our company's going to fall off, and the DoD expects that. They've come out and said, we expect attrition. We expect some companies, maybe smaller companies, saying, we can't afford this, we're going to move on. Maybe other companies will absorb that work. We don't know yet. I think it's evolving as we go, but there are going to be consequences. It's pretty clear there will be consequences. And to get back to your point, leadership teams need to know that. Imagine if we don't put this in place for our company and we lose our contracts with the DoD. I mean, that's not a good thing. So it's just like car insurance. You pay all this money for your car insurance, hoping you never get in an accident. But when you do, it's in place and it protects you.
From potentially coming up with $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, or helping you get a new vehicle if that one's totaled.
Yeah, you and I we know this. We've seen some companies that did not follow the rules. I could name 2 or 3 companies right off the top of my head that did not have things in place. They were hit with ransomware and they were down for months and months and months. People lost their jobs, and like you said, that investment could have saved people's jobs, could have saved a lot of revenue for the company. Unfortunately, it's a necessary evil.
And I think what's important here is you mentioned this before, and I want to underscore it, which is you were prepared. You had your documents ready to go. You had your policies ready to go. You had backups ready to go. You had all of the things. You did your planning and preparation ahead of time for that day, and you still got hit. But when you did get hit, you were ready and you executed the plan. Hey, no reason for panic. No reason for anybody to get, all upset. Let's follow the process and procedure that's in place. And you got the organization back up within a couple of hours. That's why you're doing all of this.
Right. And it's education as well, informing people what to look for. You don't want to, I saw that come up three days ago. Well, now you're scrambling to figure out what happened. Having these tools that you have to put in place are all there. I mean, what you guys do for us at Elmet, I can tell the folks that are watching this, you guys have helped us in the past when I've worked with you at other companies. I'll give it a scenario where we had somebody logged into an account from Nigeria. We had somebody working from home in California. Within a minute, you guys contacted us and said, hey, Joe, is this guy in Nigeria? Because he's logged in 2 places. We were able to remediate that within a few minutes. Those tools are there for a reason. And having you guys as our SIM provider really helped us in this case. I can tell you from what I've learned from other folks, just buying a SIM solution and doing the bare minimum, putting a firewall in place and not really configuring it is not going to meet the requirement. When they evaluate you, they're going to evaluate, are you using IPS IDS? Do you have FIPS mode turned on? Are you using HA? is your SIM really aggregating all those logs so that you have a real-time response in the event of an attack?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why we're putting that in place. I mean, if you can't see what's happening, you're at complete risk here. So I'll mention the one tool that you really need to have in place, and that's data loss prevention. You want to really focus on where you're storing this information. You really shouldn't have it on people's desktops. You shouldn't have it all over the place. It needs to be controlled. That you're going to see that in the NIST controls. Everything needs to be controlled. CUI needs to be controlled. So you need to know where it's at. You need to identify the document, and you need data loss prevention to tell you, is it where it needs to be or should be, and notify you when it's somewhere it shouldn't be. If somebody's trying to email this, and they shouldn't be, you need to stop it through your DLP practices. And the other thing is real. In our case, in anybody's case, I think they should be port blocking USB devices. Those devices should be an asset that you assign to people, so you know that that's our equipment. Anything that plugs in is our equipment, and it should not really be leaving the building. So CUI could be put on those devices, but they're controlled. So I think CUI handling, having a policy in place on these are the rules for how you handle these documents, really should be in place as a policy for every company.
Yeah, and you mentioned something there. So like people trying to email these documents, people trying to instant message these documents, people trying to move these documents around for ease. The biggest thing that we get complaints about is well, it's easier for me to do this. You fill in the blank, move it via Slack or Microsoft Teams or that type of thing. And it's like, well, no, you can't and you should not do that because this is the risk that it opens up. And yes, we're going to monitor it with a DLP solution so that we know when humans make mistakes that we can catch it. And then you can train and then say, no, don't do that. It's not our policy.
Yeah, you really should have a document sharing platform that meets the NIST requirements and has the right encryption methods in place for sharing information.
Yeah.
The DoD 100%. Really frowns on emailing CUI.
100%. So before we move on, I want to quickly share with our listeners, what are some of the preparing for success when you think about third-party cybersecurity assessments? You've been through a ton of these. I know you have. And so if you had to share with somebody else, what are some of the things that they should be preparing for when thinking about third-party cybersecurity assessments?
So it's really gathering your evidence, proving that you're meeting the controls. So you want to have a way of gathering all that information and categorizing it, indexing that information so you make it easier for the assessor. I personally have not gone through the assessment, but I've prepared for the assessment a few times. So I left my last company before we actually completed the assessment, but I can tell you in preparation.
You did all the hard work for them.
I did. The effort of gathering all that information to prove you're meeting the control is really core to pass in the assessment. You want to provide you don't want to provide too much, but you want to provide exactly what they need. And the more that you can provide before the actual assessment happens, so let's say your assessment is in January. You want to prepare, gather all that information, and when they're ready, you send all your evidence over. They will evaluate that and determine, well, we either need to look at this, that, it's not enough information in certain categories. So pulling all that information, proving that you can provide evidence in the event of an interview. From what I've learned, they're going to do two of three things. They're either going to just evaluate the documentation and move on. They're going to do an interview and evaluate, your response to those. And then they're going to actually look at the technology hands-on with you. So they're going to, from what other assessors are saying, you're going to pick two of the three when they come out and do your assessment. So preparing for that, having all that ready to go and having your team prepared, is really important for getting ready for that.
And I share this sentiment with you, or you share this sentiment with me, which is probably should just prepare for them to maybe sit down and look at your tech stack with you, which is the hardest thing, right? So you want to plan for the hardest thing, because that might be the thing that you're challenged with. They may come in and sit down and instead of going for the easy stuff. I think if they figure out that you are ready and you are planned and prepared and you have the evidence, they may choose the easy route, right? But if they come in and they find out that you're not planned and you're not prepared and you don't have your evidence together, that's going to probably switch gears in their mind. And then let's say, okay, let's dig in, because we can tell you don't have your stuff together.
Yeah, I would really tell everybody that you should prepare for a physical assessment of your building. They're going to come out. That's an important part of the NIST controls, is physical access control to this information. So they can look at how your building is locked down, access to areas that have and handle CUI. So you want to have that CUI boundary for your facility outlined. This is where we keep our CUI. If it's printed, it's stored away at night when it's not in use. So they really look at physical as part of this, and maybe people don't know that. They're thinking firewalls and endpoint protection. They're going to look at all that stuff. Now they're going to look at your building. Do you have control over access to the building?
Yeah, and evidence of it. Yeah. Well, Joe, so far, we have touched on a lot of, and I'm trying to make sure that we just stay on track as far as time, because I know that you're a busy man. We have talked a lot about the preparation, the strategy. Let's dive a little bit into post preparation and strategy, and now let's talk about like protecting what you've built. Right, you've now built the system, you've built the infrastructure without becoming a tech company yourself, right? Because Elmet or any of the other DoD manufacturers didn't get into business to become a tech company, right? What are your thoughts around like understanding the cyber threats, for the manufacturing as now you're in production, now you're every day company needs to produce the widget and ship the widget. How are you doing with that?
So, if you've completed your assessment, you need to prepare to renew that in 3 years. So it's not over after you finish that assessment. So when they come back, they're probably going to look at, well, have you been doing change control? Do you have logs showing evidence that you do maintenance and you document your maintenance, and then you have change control to review that? Are you doing asset management? Do you have evidence that you follow the asset management program you have in place? Also, are you patching? We receive alerts from CISA pretty much daily. If anybody's getting those, it's coming every 5 minutes, it seems. The threats are out there, and so you want to maintain patch management, vulnerability assessment. So just maintaining those tools, keeping them up to date. What's new? Are these tools obsolete? Things become obsolete over time. It's really just maintaining what you have, but looking at what's changing. Like I said, AI, I think, is going to introduce a whole new set of controls. I think some of what's in place today will meet the AI requirements, but I think it's going to evolve. My opinion is that most companies in the defense space are going to have AI threat management specifically in place, especially in preparation for quantum computing. If that ever comes about and it comes at lightning speed, how are we even going to keep up with that? That's my concern in the future, is how fast things are going to happen. What are SIMs going to look like? How are we going to remediate? Are we going to have to put in place AI remediation tools that learn what we normally do? And then so I think how these things evolve over time, we all know that we're in, these days things are moving so fast and technology is changing every day. Cybersecurity is going to have to keep up with that.
And there was something there that you had said that I want to just come back to is 3 years from now, you've got to renew this, right? So within that period, 36 months, you are going to have to prove that you followed your processes and your procedures and all of that over that 3-year time period. And if you did not, that's a finding, right? And then did you remediate it, or does the problem still exist today?
You want to maintain all your evidence. Everything that you put together for your initial assessment, you're going to need to maintain that, including your SSP. So obviously, people who know CMMC knows that's a living document. Anything you change in your environment, you need to change your SSP as well. Keep your POEM up to date.
Yeah, so you're mentioning some great acronyms for people that may not know or they're not really sure. Talk about the POEM for a minute and talk about the SSP.
So the system security plan is required to even do a self-score. So if you go out on to the PIEE site where you do your own self-score, you're a DoD supplier, you have to give a self-score on the NIST controls. Do you meet the 110? Are you a 50? Are you an 80? Whatever it might be. So the SSP is required to even do a self-score.
Right.
It's required to be in place to even have an assessment. So if you don't have that, you're not even meeting a 0. Matter of fact, you can have a negative score if you don't have that. The POEM is your plan of actions and milestones. Those are the things that you need to remediate. These are things we haven't completed or they're outstanding. You should be maintaining a POEM, a list of what's needed to be done, when you expect to have those done. So let's say you've had your assessment and a year down the road, you decide you're re-architecting your VLAN structure. You probably want to put a note in your POEM saying, all right, well, our VLAN is not in compliance yet. We're in the middle of a restructuring. So anything you're going through that you're changing that pulls you down from the 110, you want to keep track of that.
Yeah, that's great. And so you kind of alluded to, or you're almost reading my notes here. It was like, let's talk for a minute about when we know manufacturers are going to have lots of systems. They might be legacy systems. They might be systems that, are maybe even out of date. And so how do you deal with that? But let's talk for a few minutes around securing critical systems, like whether it's OT networks or proprietary design data. Would you have some advice for people that might be, challenged with that?
Yeah, so that's a good topic. Years ago, when you thought of PLCs and OT networks, and who can get to that? And you can't even do it. Well, now, it's those are being compromised. Your manufacturing part of the network should be VLAN, should be controlled. You keep in line with what CISA is telling you. Those usually come out on a regular basis. Whatever solution needs to be patched. So you want to be patching even your OT network.
Yes.
Controlling those. If there is no CUI running on those, it's really focused on supply chain management for the DoD. They may look at your OT and say, yeah, you can't store any CUI on it. But if China were to take down your whole network and compromise the supply chain, they're looking at that as well. That's why they're trying to protect. They're not just trying to protect their data. They're trying to protect the supply chain in the event of an attack or whatever it might be. So that is within the boundaries. It could be an avenue to gain access to your network and cause other problems where CUI resides. So you want to have control over that. Maybe, like I said, it's not part of the CUI boundary, but it's part of the network, and you want to protect it.
You bring up a topic. I was just having a conversation the other day with another individual, and when you look at what's going on geopolitically right now, and the Israel bombing with Iran, the U.S. bombing the 3 nuclear sites in Iran, and then immediately afterwards, Iran coming out and saying that they are going to have cyber attack operations against the United States. And so be careful, watch out for critical infrastructure and watch out for these things. Me personally, I would even say that CMMC/DoD falls into that critical infrastructure, because if they attack the supply chain and get data, steal data, encrypt, ransom, what have you, you fill in the blank, right? I mean, that is critical to our Department of Defense and our ability to defend the United States. And so I think that what we are seeing with physical war and then the retaliation methods can be cyber war. I'm inclined to say we should be careful. Our DoD supply chain should be very careful about what they're doing right now and making sure that they meet and exceed these standards to protect our defense.
Yeah, I mean, you may be a small supplier, and you may be saying, we just provide widgets, to one of the primes. I mean, how are we going to impact, Boeing and the whole country? If you're the only producer of whatever you're making, they could target you. I mean, I can tell you that they're always monitoring what we're doing. I heard a great story at one of the conferences where they were saying that our adversaries are monitoring the pizza deliveries to the Pentagon at night, because when that raises, there's a number of a whole ramp up of pizza deliveries. They know people are working late preparing for something. So our adversaries are watching that to prepare for whatever they might be doing. So if you look at the supply chain, I'm sure China knows you're in it. If you're making something for a missile or a jet or something, if they take you out, that impacts the supply chain. If there's actual war, and they take that out, it's not good for us. If we're the only supplier in our industry.
That's a great point. I hope people take that to heart and don't think so small of themselves. That yes, if you are the only supplier of that widget, that screw, that ball bearing, that whatever, and they ransom you, they take you out, and you're not prepared, you can't recover, you've just now affected the supply chain big time. One of the things I wanted to chat with you about is, how do you think about leveraging external cybersecurity providers? You've talked to a lot of people in the space, and like you said, you've been in the space for about 40 years. What's your take on external cybersecurity providers, whether they're MDR, MSPs, vCISOs?
Yeah, so I've worked with quite a few. I think it's really how the partnership evolves. Do you have a good partner that's going to help you? That's what I focus on. Is this a great partner that we can build things together, and they can support us when we need? We've really surrounded ourselves at Elmet with some great suppliers like BitLyft and others. And it's really an evolving relationship. We talked a lot in the last number of minutes here about how things are evolving. And if you have a good partner that can keep up with those things, we really rely on BitLyft to give us inside information. In the past when we've worked together, we had these regular meetings, and hey Joe, we should let you know one of our partners had this happen, or we heard about this, and it's good to hear what's happening, because then that helps you prepare. Yeah, I think it's really a relationship that you want to have in place, and there's trust there that you're getting what you need. Obviously, if you get bad information, that's not going to be good for you. I will tell you that not every cybersecurity supplier knows CMMC. I know from my personal experience going to some conferences, seeking out some additional assistance. I've had some say, yeah, we can't help you. That's way above what we can do. So finding somebody that really can show that they know, if you're in the CMMC space, do they really know it? Get some evidence, maybe talk with some references, that have already gone down that path. You want to have somebody that knows what they're doing, because you don't want to invest all this money and then find out, we did it wrong. I can tell you from my experience, I've heard about that, seen that happen, and it's not good for the company, because now you've got to go back to square one, start over again. So I think it's really important to make sure they know what they're talking about, and references would probably be a good space. Or if you know the CMMC space yourself, really challenge them in understanding what they know.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important to us. Like, we want to make sure that we're honest, truthful, transparent around what we're doing. BitLyft itself is not only are we SOC 2 Type 2, but we are also going for CMMC Level 2 compliancy and certification as well. We're working with a C3 PAO, right? So all of these things, and so they're evidence, right? We can supply evidence to ensure that there is proof that we're doing what we say we're doing. Versus, some of the other companies out there we've run across as well, that they'll say that they're doing those things, but they can't come up with the evidence. And so I would highly advise you to look for the evidence, ask for the evidence, make sure that the proof matches up to what you're expecting. Talk to a C3 PAO and to verify, who is the C3 PAO that you're working with? Can we talk with them? And that should all be, yes, here's their name, here's their contact, you're free to call them. If there's him and hawing around, that there's probably something there that you should press into.
Yeah, there's things that you can ask of the vendor. Do they have a vendor responsibility matrix that they can share with you? Are they actually FedRAMP? Are they saying they're FedRAMP equivalent, but they don't understand what the controls are? So yeah, you really have to challenge them in providing the evidence. A lot of the those that are saying they're FedRAMP equivalent, but actually meet most of the requirements, can provide that information to you and say, here's how we meet them. We don't meet all 110 controls, but we don't need to because we only provide this much to the organization.
Are there any, guidance that you would give on streamlining security without overwhelming your resources?
Oh, I wish I could find that out. It's hard to keep up. I mean, there are things changing so much. There's a lot of vendors out there that have, one-stop shop tools. Here we can do it all for you. You got to be careful with those. Sometimes they do meet the requirements, but not always. So
yeah, I'd say they're far and few between.
Yeah. FIPS encryption is an important one to ask about. Do you have the right level of encryption? From my own experience years ago, we thought we had found a document sharing platform, 6 layers of encryption, but didn't have FIPS. And so we begged them, if you just put FIPS in place, we can use you. And they decided, we're not going to do that. So we had to move on. It's really important to find the right vendors, and I don't know if there's an easy way. There's no easy button for cybersecurity.
I would say it's not all doomsday, right? Like a lot of the tasks that we've talked about so far can be daunting. What I have done in the past is also just encourage people to just embark upon the challenge, right? Like, crack open the pages of the NIST 800-171 and start to read through it and realize, like, you might already be doing some of those things and you might find some things that you're not doing, and just embark upon the journey, and start doing the paperwork. I had somebody that, shared with me once that the difficult tasks they thought about as eating like a piece of pie. And they would start with the crust first, because oftentimes they didn't like the crust, but it was part of the piece of pie, right? And oftentimes, we as tech people, we might not like paperwork and documentation and writing these things. Well, they're part of our job, like it's part of the piece of pie. And so we got to start with the crust first. And so I was talking with somebody a couple of weeks ago, and I just said, well, maybe what you do is you'd start out your day with the documentation, maybe for the first hour or two of the day, and just get it out of the way. And tomorrow, start again. Spend an hour or two every day on it, and eventually you'll get it done. But if you start your day with the hardest part, well, then you'll end your day with the easiest part, hopefully. But I just encourage people to embark upon the journey and get started, and then it will take care of itself. What do you think on those thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I always encourage my team to make documentation as part of the whole process. So we're implementing a whole new set of servers. This is great. It's going to be fun. We set it all up. But don't forget, we have to update our SSP. We have to update our DR plan as well. Now we have a new set of equipment. Is there critical applications running on those? So you just need to make it part of your methodology. When we go through a project, we go through an effort, we need to finish up by finishing the documentation. And so my teams and the teams I've worked with in the past, we put together an IT run book. And as we develop or we produce something, if we need to put together instructions for that, so the next person knows how to do it, or we have reference to that, that's going to help you in the end. You go through your assessment, you show you have good control over your processes, you document well. They don't only look at, oh, do you have an access control plan? Do you have this policy, that policy? They look at how you manage and control the environment. Do you have good control? Do you document? Do you communicate well as a team? There's a lot that they look at, and they'll walk away feeling confident that this is a great group of guys or of people. They know what they're doing. They document well. It's going to help you. Obviously, you have to meet all the controls and show you meet those requirements. But having governance in place, methodology. You don't have to overwhelm your team either. Don't try to, slam in some robust methodology and, you got to go through 500 steps just to get through a task. Do what fits your environment well, but gives you the right controls and helps your team stay agile.
Yeah. You bring up a good point around team, right? Is there any thoughts that you have around when it comes to like making sure that the team isn't burnt out or they're not, they're still achieving the vision and the mission of the company, but they're not getting burnt out in IT, right? And like wanting to quit and move on.
Yeah, it's really about teamwork, sharing the burden. So, we're not a large team. We're an agile, lean team. And so we do a lot of cross training, so that there's support across the board, communicating well, collaborating, communicating on a regular basis is really important. And that's obvious if you're managing this type of a project.
Yeah.
What are we doing next? Are we staying on track? Hey, can we get some help here? Whatever it might be.
Yeah, I concur with that completely. That you've got to communicate, you got to share the burden, you got to make sure that people don't feel like they're left alone and they're on an island all by themselves. That it actually is a team, and that's really good. Any thoughts around, say, if somebody's listening to this and they're like, wow, any actionable advice for manufacturers that might just be beginning their cyber journey?
There's a lot of misconceptions that, oh, we'll get to the end. We'll get to it at some point and we'll just knock it out. This has to really be thought out and planned out. The average time to complete this type of project is at least a year and a half. So you want to plan all this out, communicate to your team, plan to budget whatever you don't have in place yet. But it is attainable. It can be done. There are people out there that are getting it done, and there's already been quite a few companies that have already received their certifications. So, I encourage people to either listen to podcasts like this or attend webinars, stay educated on what's out there and what other people are doing. It's helped me a lot. There's some Discord channels out there specifically for this industry. And that's a great place to go to learn more about what people are doing and get some support from other folks. I encourage people, if you can, to get a CMMC consultant that's really knowledgeable. You don't have to pay $20,000 a month. You can, if you find the right consultant, you can set up, an hour here, an hour there to help them, have them guide you through the process. I've done that in the past. It works out great. Not all companies can afford, top consultants, but you find the right partner, you meet when you need, get some guidance, get some answers, and keep you on the right track to getting it done.
That's great advice. We too have interviewed. We've interviewed until we found the right partner that is flexible and making sure that they're, I appreciate top dollar people out in the space, but I also need to find people that are affordable. And I would say that you're not. There are people out there in the space that are affordable, but also are following the same guidelines, rules, and regulations, and that will coach you and consult you through the process that you need. And so, I echo those remarks, and thinking through, just final thoughts. Anything that you're hoping to achieve or see come to fruition here in the rest of 2025?
Well, for us, just getting through this year and getting prepared for our assessment next year.
Yeah.
There's one thing that's been hanging out there that has not really been released by the DoD yet, and that's the FAR rule for the definition of CUI. That's been out there for a really long time, and we keep hearing, "Oh, it's going to be next year. It's going to be next year." I think it'd be great to finally have a clear definition on what CUI is, because most of us that are going through this, we rely on the prime or the DoD to tell us, this is CUI and you need to protect it. They don't always do that. And they don't always document that this is CUI. They don't mark them always correctly. So you really got to rely on your customer or how you define CUI within your own organization. But it would really be great, I think if we got the FAR rule that came out with a clear definition on this is CUI and this is how you should protect it.
Well, that's awesome. I'm very much appreciative of your time today, Joe. See you at the National Cyber Summit. And if you need to find that, if you're watching or listening to this, it is the National Cybersecurity Summit that happens in Huntsville. We're not promoting it in any way, but it's just one of those conferences that we go to. I know Joe goes to. We're going to this year in 2025, and so it's a great place to learn, shake hands, and meet other people that are in the space. Some final thoughts or final remarks as we kind of wrap up today's Miller Mindset. Joe, if somebody wants to reach out to you and contact you, where could they get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'd be happy to answer any questions or give any guidance that you might need.
Connect with you there. Yeah. And then, is the Elmet website, is that a great place for people to go to, or?
Yeah, well, you could always reach out to our Elmet site, contact us at our support site and email, and you can reach me that way as well.
Awesome. Yeah. And Elmet is spelled ELMET and then technologies. So Joe, it was awesome talking with you today. I'd love to chat with you more again. So maybe if your time opens up later this year, we can come back and have a follow up, and maybe they'll clarify that rule in the FAR.
Yeah, great. It's been great. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you.